Hello everyone, I'm Peter Catlin, and I'd like to tell you about the different types of sources that you'll be looking for your research assignments. Each source that you cite in a paper is supposed to make your paper stronger somehow, but different types of sources will make your paper stronger in different ways. If you know what type of source you're looking at, then you'll know what it can do for you. You'll also know what it can't do for you, because there are some things that some sources just can't do. So, what types of sources are out there? One way of dividing up sources is to classify sources either as popular or scholarly. The difference here is the audience that the source was written for. A popular source is written for a popular audience, which is to say, it's written so that anyone can read it. A scholarly source is written for a scholarly audience. Scholar here meaning an expert in the field. Examples of scholarly sources would be scholarly journal articles, scholarly books, or articles that were collected in scholarly books. During your time at college, as you get more and more research assignments, you may notice that your professors are insisting that you cite scholarly sources. There's a reason for that. Professors want you to cite scholarly sources, not just because professors are being snooty. No, professors want you to cite scholarly sources because they help your paper in several specific ways. They have all these useful features. Let's talk about some of these features that can help you. One feature is that, by definition, they're written by experts. The authors know what they're talking about. Another useful feature is that most journal articles, not all of them, but more than 90%, are peer-reviewed. What that means is that before they were even published, they were reviewed by other experts. So you have the peace of mind of knowing that not only was it written by an expert, but also it passed the review of other experts before being published. Scholarly sources will consider details and nuances. They will use precise and technical language so you know exactly what it is they're trying to say. They'll cite things, they'll cite evidence to back up their claims, and they'll cite other scholars' analyses. They lay out their reasoning in clear and logical arguments. You may not agree with them, but at least you'll know why they believe whatever it is they believe. And scholars will attempt to be unbiased. I say attempt because no one can truly be completely unbiased, and no source is completely unbiased. But scholars will try to get as close as they can. They'll use neutral language, and they'll consider objections. Let's see an example of a scholarly source. This is an article that was published in a scholarly journal. I can tell just by looking at this that this is a scholarly source. And you can too if you know what to look for. I'm going to point out 3 indicators which tell me that this is, in fact, scholarly. The first indicator is the author. Not just the author's name, which is right here, but also the author's credentials. We can see that she's affiliated with the University of Texas, Austin, specifically the School of Journalism there. This gives us a reason to believe that she may be an expert. That's the first indicator. The second indicator that you're dealing with a scholarly source is the language that scholars use. Remember, the language that scholars use tends to be technical and precise and contain jargon terms. Look at the abstract here. She says, collective memory research shows that obituaries reflect what the present thinks of the past. 5 nostalgic racialized frames emerge from these obituaries. That kind of language is the language that a scholar would use. So there's your second indicator right there. For the third indicator, I'm going to flip all the way to the end of the article. Look at this. Down at the bottom here, see where it says references? This is the reference list, also known as the bibliography or the works cited. Look at all these citations. That's useful to you. It's useful in part because it gives you a reason to trust that the author's information is based on truth. But it's also useful because you can follow up on any of these. If you see something interesting on this list, you can go find that thing and read that thing, and maybe use it in your own project. So there's your third indicator right there. I can tell this is a scholarly source because of all the citations to other sources at the end. So that's one way to divide up all the sources that exist out there. We can classify some of them as popular and some of them as scholarly. But that's not the only way to divide up all these sources. There's another way to classify sources. We can also sort them into primary sources and secondary sources. This is not the same thing as popular versus scholarly. Yes, I know they both begin with the letters P and S, but that's a coincidence. This is a different distinction that we're talking about now. This distinction is based on first-hand or second-hand information. By definition, a primary source is first-hand information about the thing you're studying. A secondary source is second-hand information about the thing you're studying. So, for example, let's say you're studying a historical event, a protest march that happened at a particular place at a particular time. A primary source about that would perhaps be an interview with someone who was there, or a photograph taken on the scene, or a news report by a reporter who was there, or a memoir written by someone who was there. All of those are first-hand information. Contrast that to secondary sources, which are written by people who were not there. Someone who read about it and then wrote what they thought based on what they read. An example of this might be an opinion piece in a newspaper or magazine, or some journal articles. Lots of journal articles are written by scholars who were not actually there themselves, but still have something to say based on what they've read. For the purposes of your assignment, you need both of these, but you need them for different reasons. You need primary sources because they can be used as evidence to support your claims. Now, just like in a court of law, the best evidence to make a case is first-hand evidence, first-hand witness, somebody who knows from their own personal experience that what you're claiming is true. But you also need secondary sources because you need analysis. Analysis by experts tells you what people are saying about the thing that you're studying. We want to know not only what you think about the thing you're studying, but about what the experts think about the thing you're studying. Let's put it all together. A source can be popular or scholarly. It can also be primary or secondary. These are some examples that I've provided of all these different types of sources. That sure is a lot, right? But wait, there's more. That's right, there's even more beyond those things. I've just told you about primary sources and secondary sources, and you may hear your professor use the word tertiary source. I need to explain that because the word tertiary source is a misnomer. Yes, tertiary sources do exist, but the word doesn't refer to third-hand information. If you hear your professor talk about tertiary sources, what they mean is background information. Background information, like you might read in a textbook, or a study guide, or an encyclopedia, such as Wikipedia. All of these things provide short overviews or summaries. And don't get me wrong, this is valuable. Something like Wikipedia is really great when you're starting out. When you're familiarizing yourself with a topic that you don't yet know much about, you can read a summary, maybe write down a few clues to follow up on, and then go find things you can cite. But I would not cite a textbook, I would not cite a study guide, and I would not cite an encyclopedia, and it's all for the same reason. I would not cite these things because they contain no original information. No original evidence, like those primary sources have, no original analysis, like those secondary sources have. All that these tertiary sources provide is repeated information. They repeat and repeat and repeat, but they never add anything new of their own. So don't cite tertiary sources, just use them for getting started. Finally, we can answer the question. The question is, what are you looking for? And here's the answer. You're looking for background information to help you get started. You're looking for primary sources to give you evidence to support your claims. And you're looking for scholarly sources to give you expert analysis. Looking at the chart, primary is the left-hand column, scholarly is the bottom row. That's what you're looking for. So I want to caution you about that upper right-hand corner of the chart. This is my word of caution. Popular sources should not be cited in a college-level paper unless they're also primary sources that provide first-hand evidence. This means, for example, that you shouldn't necessarily trust an opinion piece that you read in a magazine or a newspaper or on the internet, because if it's meant for a popular audience and it's not written by an expert, then it has no value to you. All that you're looking for is primary sources and scholarly sources.